What up, party people? I'm just kidding. I don't really open my videos that way. A friend of mine was looking at my YouTube channel and she was like, "Oh, your content is really good, but like your intros and outros are a little lackluster. You should bring something to them." I'm like, I'm not trying to be an influencer here, man. So, if you're new to my channel, it really just started off with me intending to teach people how to script coordinate. If you don't know, a script coordinator is one of the assistant jobs in the TV writer's office. So I created this whole video tutorial module that you can check out on my channel if you're interested in that. I also have a short film called Playing It Straight that I wrote and produced that's autobiographical. Check that out as well. So, in trying to get this channel up and running, I've been doing a lot of like guest lectures at colleges and talking to up and coming writers. And I find that I'm giving the same advice over and over. So I figured it might be helpful if I just if I put all this advice in one video for you guys to listen to. So I'm going to start off just talking about some sort of more philosophical stuff in terms of, especially in terms of writing a pilot. Then I'll get into more of like the nuts and bolts lessons that I've learned as a writer, and then talk about some more like overall career type stuff at the end. I'm gonna be looking in this direction a lot because I have a whole list of things that I listed out, and I didn't memorize all this stuff, so I'm gonna be looking over here at my list. And at the end of the video, I'm gonna put a screenshot of this list on the video, so don't feel like you have to, I don't know, write down or try to memorize all the things I'm saying. First thing, understand what you're trying to accomplish with your pilot. Yes. So, first off, a pilot is, in my opinion, the most difficult thing to write. Because a feature, even though it's longer, a feature is a beginning, middle, and end. Unless, you're really trying to write something where there's going to be a sequel, you kind of can it's a closed loop, a feature. A pilot has to tell sort of a concise story, but then it's also got to be open-ended enough for people to be able to see, for people to, one, like want to watch the next episode, and two, be able to see kind of like what the week to week sort of would be if this were a TV show. So it's very tricky, but you need to remember what the purpose of your pilot is. And that generally is to get like an agent, or more likely a manager, interested in signing you, or potentially if you have some kind of connection to a TV show, trying to get the showrunner to read your script, so maybe they'll give you a freelance episode of the show, let you write like an episode of the show. It's probably, your pilot is probably not something that someone is reading to consider like buying or shooting. So you need to be keeping that in mind in terms, again, of like who's reading it and why they're reading it. Remember, it's a pilot. You're not writing a series. You don't need to waste your time creating a Bible unless there's like a producer attached to it who's telling you to do that. You really have to keep in mind that it's this one pilot script and it's nothing beyond that. Keep it simple. I had read this pilot by, from an aspiring writer, and it was like a 12 Years a Slave type of thing. And obviously there's a place for 12 Years a Slave in this world. I mean, it won an Oscar. But for purposes of a pilot, like if you're reading that script, I get to page 3 and you've thrown 30 characters at me, and and it's just like Johnny said this and Tommy said this, and it's like I have to try to keep in mind who all these people are. And I'm just like I'm lost as a reader. That's just, again, the person reading it is not going to want to put a lot of effort into reading an up and coming writer. They don't have time, meaning that the person reading you doesn't have a lot of time. They need to be devoting most of their bandwidth to their established clients. So they're not going to want to read a script that is going to require a lot of bandwidth from them to sort of understand. And that's not to say you can't write something a little bit complicated, but it does need to be a clear story. In terms of your characters, something that will help your reader is like if a character is not important, don't give them a name. What I mean is, if I'm reading a script and someone is like server, like, okay, that person is just there for the purpose of being a server. I don't need to like commit them to memory or understand like why they're there, what their journey is. But like if you name your server like Janet, then I'm like, okay, then this is like a character I need to remember. Who's Janet? Why do I care about her? So yeah, like not naming characters that don't need to be named will help out your reader a little bit. One of the, I wouldn't say it's a hard and fast rule to not jump around in time, but I would say if possible, err on the side of telling a linear story. Um, Flashbacks can be helpful, but I wouldn't recommend trying to do like a Tarantino type of thing where it's like all this stuff is happening out of order. Because one, that's going to require that the reader read it all the way to the end. And again, a lot of times when you're a young writer, the reader's only going to read like the first 10 pages of your script. There's a show, there was a show, I was going to say a few years ago, but it's probably more like 15, 20 years ago, something like that, called Breakout Kings, written by Nick Santora, who created Scorpion. And the premise of the show was that this like group of prisoners had successfully broken out of prison and then they had been recaptured. So the cops established this like special team, and every time someone breaks out of prison, the cops get this team of prisoners together and they go try to track down this person who's broken out of prison. And every time they can successfully, bring them to justice, they get like a month off their sentence in prison. That's a very clear, very easy to understand formula, very easy to see what the week to week would be. And granted, that's a procedural. And if you're not a procedural writer, you're more of like shrinking or something like that. You're not going to write a procedural, but like you understand my point that that's just like a very clear, easy to understand story. I think that's a really good blueprint for the kind of pilot you want to write when you're just kind of trying to show someone that you can craft a story. One of the mistakes that I see younger writers make is trying to save too many bullets for episodes that are probably, not going to ever be read or not going to ever happen. Again, in this 12 Years a Slave pilot that I was referencing, I asked the writer, I said, I'm surprised that whatever the plot point was, I'm surprised this didn't happen in the pilot. And she was like, oh, that'd be like episode 3. And like, yeah, no, I get it. Yes, if you were writing something that was a series order, then yeah, that probably would happen in episode 3. But you're saving something that is an important plot point and is like probably a good plot point. You're saving it for a script that no one's ever going to read. Like, again, no one's reading episode 3. Your pilot is sort of your only shot here to prove yourself. So I would say, don't try to cram a whole season's worth of story into your pilot. But also, like, if you've got good stuff, I would say err on the side of putting it in the pilot. Because again, that's your one chance to shine. Don't save too many of your bullets. As fast as you can, as bad as it has to be. Yes, I had a professor in college who would say this, and I think about it all the time. First drafts are tough. That is certainly the part of the process I struggle with the most. I can sit in front of my computer and rewrite all day long once I have some version of everything. But writing the first draft when it's just this blank scene and you haven't written anything, I struggle with that. So yeah, I think about it all the time. As fast as you can, as bad as it has to be. Just get it down on paper, and then you can sort of revise from there. Takes a lot of wrong answers to get to the right one. That is, I would say, my number one mantra. and it's pretty much self-explanatory. Like, and because wrong answers are valuable. So, you could spend a whole day writing or however long going down a path that doesn't wind up working, and you can't say to yourself, "Oh, that was an enormous waste of time," because it wasn't. It accomplished you knowing what doesn't work, which means you're that much closer to figuring out what does work. So, and this also sort of speaks to to notes. I think that there's a misconception that like if someone's giving you notes, that you did something wrong or notes are a bad thing. Notes are a good thing because certainly like if you work on a TV show, the showrunner has very, very, very little time. It's like being the president of the United States. They're getting pulled in a million different directions constantly. So it's rare that if you are below like on a TV show, there's like low levels, mid levels, and upper levels. It's rare on most TV shows that even at the mid level, you're going to get notes. Usually it's literally just you'll turn in your script. The showrunner will say, thanks for the work. And then he'll give it to his or her upper levels to rewrite. So if you're getting notes, whether it's from a showrunner or a rep, it means they're invested in you. So that's a good thing. And again, it all sort of ties back to this, like it takes a lot of wrong answers to get to the right one. Nothing, especially a first draft, is never going to be perfect. It's a work in progress. Yeah, a story that I heard recently that I thought was interesting. When Wendy Miracle was running Arrow, she was on a panel at Comic-Con, and someone asked her, when you're staffing up Arrow, what kind of samples are you looking for? Because I write mostly darker stuff. And Wendy was like, honestly, like when I'm staffing, I get sent 300 versions of the same superhero script. So anything that you can write to sort of stand out and be different is helpful. So even though, you're trying to get put up for a CW show, don't be afraid to leave the cuss words in there. Like anything that makes it feel like not the same version of the same script that I've read 100 times is helpful. Kind of have a story about this that I hope doesn't get me canceled, but this was like early 2000s, I think. I've never had much success in the writing fellowships, but the furthest I got to the second round of Warner Brothers, and it was for a spec I had written of The Office, and the premise was that Michael Scott, every year he'd watch the Jerry Lewis telethon, and then he would choose like a cause to get behind. And the cause he was going to get behind this year, or in my pilot, was euthanasia. But he thought it was 3 words, like youth in Asia, like the mistreatment of Asian children. And that pilot got me to the second round, or that spec got me to the second round of Warner Brothers. And I honestly think like they probably read, I don't know how, like hundreds or whatever the number is of Office specs. And they were probably all somewhat comparable in terms of like ability, but mine maybe stood out because they thought that was like like a funny hook. So anything you can come up with to sort of be different, like I don't know if it's true or not, but I heard that Kurt Sutter, who created Sons of Anarchy, and some other stuff, I heard that he like the script that put him on the map was he had written a spec of The West Wing, but like everybody got murdered, which sounds like very Kurt Sutter. But I don't know. That's like the type of thing that would sort of set you apart. I have long been bored with what I know. Oh yeah, I heard this quote from a guy named Kevin Hooks, who's a big time TV director, and he's done some feature stuff too. He directed one of my favorite '90s action movies called Passenger 57. For example, if I'm watching something and it's that scene where it's like 2 characters who aren't supposed to be kissing get caught kissing by the person who's not supposed to catch them kissing, I'm just like, oh my God. Like, how do you even in good conscience write that scene? We've seen that scene so many freaking times. Or it's like someone overhears a secret they're not supposed to overhear. It's just lazy writing. And it's just boring because I've seen it a million times. One of the pilots in my portfolio is a family drama, but the mom is a serial killer. And before I like wrote it, I was getting some pressure, some pushback to make the main character a male. And it's because there's sort of this like notion or belief in our industry that you can't write lead characters that you don't, that aren't you, basically, that like you don't know what it's like to live in their life. I guess it's harder to sell, like, because I'm obviously a white man. So writing a show that has like a female lead is, I don't know, harder to sell, I guess. But my thing was like, if I have to make it a male lead, then I don't want to write it, because like I've seen a white male serial killer. Like I've seen that hundreds of times. I have nothing new to bring to that story. Like I have no interest in writing it if I have to make it a male. So trusted my instincts and I wrote it as a female, and it's worked out well for me. Promise of the premise. Yeah, that's just kind of a term we throw around, but like, if you're, if you go see the movie Training Day, obviously that, like, you know what that movie's gonna be about. That's not gonna last more than one day, and it's not gonna be about, I don't know, something else. It's gonna be about Training Day. So like if your script is called Shootout at the OK Corral, there better be a shootout at the OK Corral. Just like remember what the promise of sort of your premise is, and especially like the title of your show. Play to your strengths. Yes. When you're writing your pilot, what the reader is really looking for is, what is your superpower? Because like when you get reps are they want to brand you as like you're the character writer, the dialogue writer, you're the funny joke person, you're the person who writes big super action stunt stuff. You're the writer who's really good with structure, whatever it is. Like, because when a showrunner is staffing up a show, it's almost like making a band. They're not going to staff 6 drummers. They need different writers who are good at different things. So you kind of just have to show off, really show off what it is that your superpower is in your pilot. That's your chance to show it off. And remember, like, not everyone is going to love everything that you write. Like, I'm a very dialogue-y character writer, and I like to play with like witty banter. More of that like Sorkin style. I'm certainly not comparing myself to Aaron Sorkin, but more of that sort of style. And that doesn't appeal to everybody. And then there's other, people who that really appeals to, who don't really care that much about like the big action set piece stuff. So yeah, just like when I was coming up, I had written a pilot that got a little bit buzzy on the blacklist, and got some opportunities from that. And then I had submitted it to Tracking Board, and like the person at Tracking Board who read it just like hated it, panned it. And it's like, all right, well, I guess like the people who happened to read it at Blacklist, that my type of writing appealed to them, and the person at Tracking Board who read it, my type of writing did not appeal to that person. So, just take it with a grain of salt. Not everyone's going to love everything you write. All right, so getting into more of the like nuts and bolts of writing. When I'm reading a pilot by a newer writer, I kind of am I have 3 big questions. Like when I get to page like 10 or so, I'm not big on hard and fast rules. It doesn't have to be like by page 10, but like that like page 10 end of act 1-ish area, I'm asking myself 3 questions. 1, most importantly, do I know whose story it is? Do I know what character we're taking this journey with? 2, do I know what the world is? Like, do I know what world we're playing in here? And then 3, what's like the interesting thing that's like making me say like, all right, well, I don't know if I'm super into this, but like this one nugget is interesting, and I kind of want to I want to keep reading because I want to see how this plays out. Is there something that's keeping me interested enough to keep going? Because again, the people reading this may not be inclined to read past like your page 10 end of act 1 type of area. And then sort of a bonus question. I wouldn't say this is as much of like a mandate, but it is helpful, is like, can I see like what the week to week would be if this were a TV show? Like sometimes you can kind of see that by page 10 or so. Sometimes it's like, it's sort of a reveal toward the end of the pilot where you're like, oh, I thought we were going this way, and then this just took a massive turn, and now I see what the show's going to be, and like that's kind of fine. But I mean, again, like if you can answer the, I would say really, really, really make sure you answer those three questions in the first 10 pages or so. And then that fourth question is kind of like a bonus. Like if you can get it in, that's great. Give the reader a boat to navigate the world you've created. Yes. I find that a lot of young writers are good at creating a world, but not necessarily always good at like uh, giving you the character to navigate the world through. And I find it helpful to almost think of it as like if you've ever been on like the Pirates of the Caribbean or the Small World ride, like at Disneyland, like you're going through this world and you can kind of see what the world is, but like your character is the boat that's taking you through the world. It's taking the reader through the world. So like, I'll read scripts sometimes and I'm like, it's cool they've created this world, but like I don't have a character to like experience this world with. Urgency, yes. So I find that like slow burns are tough when you're a young writer, and again we go back to this like what's the purpose of your pilot. Obviously there's some great shows like Breaking Bad is a slower burn. Shrinking, I'm going to keep referencing Shrinking because I think it's one of the best shows on TV. Shrinking is like a little bit of a slower burn in that like the stakes aren't inherently high because you're not dealing with sort of like, I want to say you're not dealing with life and death, but that show is like about death in a way. Um, but it's not like someone's going to die if Jason Segel doesn't make it to the end of the pilot. So like The Night Agent, that show is just like, if you almost imagine it like your pilot, it like has like a snowball, and that snowball is just raging through your script, and that's your main character, and it's like they are being pushed through this story and they have to make it to the end. That's going to really help you a lot in writing your pilot. And like you can feel it when you're writing something that sort of doesn't have that, because it's like when you go from scene to scene, you come up on your next scene, you're like, all right, like what's this scene about? And it's just like each scene just kind of feels like a nothing burger because there's kind of nothing at stake and there's no sort of urgency for the characters to kind of like keep going in the story. And it makes it really hard to write the scenes when there's sort of no urgency for the story to keep going or the characters to keep going. And like, yeah, like Breaking Bad, Shrinking, like you're talking about Vince Gilligan and Bill Lawrence, masters of their craft, who are not only masters but also like the cred to take their time. Like you don't really have the cred to take your time, so you kind of just have to like find something where it's like the reader is really inclined to like just be being pushed through this script, like again like a snowball just burning through this script. Build the house before you decorate it. Yeah, like writing the script, is fun, but you do kind of have to do like the groundwork before, like you need to do your outline or whatever your process is before you can kind of start doing the fun stuff. Like don't be worrying about making every scene perfect. Just like try to get like your framework, and then you can kind of like, start to play and have some fun, but like really get your foundation of your house built before you start trying to decorate it and make it all fancy. And lay it out early. This is the most like remedial thing that I'll talk about on this list. But it is something that helped me when I was first starting out, is like you want to come into a scene where like you're not going to see like an experienced writer messing around with hellos and goodbyes much unless there's a reason for it. Like you want to come into the scene where like whatever is happening is sort of already happening, and then you want to get out before like you don't want to have like they finish talking about what are they talking about and then it's like, okay, goodbye, and then walk out. Like you don't need any of that. Just start the scene with the action already happening in the scene before the action is sort of done. Your villain has to think they're Jesus, not Satan. Yes. If your villain is just doing evil things for the purpose of being evil, it's not really going to work. Like if you think about Thanos, like Thanos believed he was doing the right thing. And that's what sort of makes your villains interesting, is that they believe they're doing the right thing. Don't give all the good shit to the day player. Glenn Mazzara, who's one of the best writers in ever, when he was, I believe he was running the Shield. If he wasn't, he was like one of the higher ups on the Shield. And he tells this story of this writer had written this scene on the Shield, and the scene was that Vic, the main character, was gonna break up with his girlfriend. So the way the writer had written the scene was they started in the girlfriend's apartment with the girlfriend. She gets a knock on the door. It's Vic. He breaks up with her. He leaves, and then they stayed on the girlfriend to see like how sad she was. And Glenn was like, Vic is the main character of the show. It is his show. This scene needs to be written as we start on Vic walking down the hallway, whatever his attitude is about going to break up with this girl, knocks on the door, breaks up with her, stay on Vic as he leaves to get his reaction to breaking up with her. Again, it's his show. He's the main character. Like, we don't care necessarily what her reaction is. Think about being on set. Yeah, and obviously this comes with the experience of being on set, but like once you've had a chance to be on set and you've worked with actors, reading your words, and sort of dealt with like their notes and sort of like their thoughts in terms of performance, you start to notice things in your writing that you may not necessarily have noticed before. Like, if you're like on a TV show and the lead character is in a scene and they just have like one throwaway line in the scene and that's the only line they have in the whole scene, I don't care how nice of a person they are, they're not going to be happy about being on set and having this one throwaway line when they're the number one on the call sheet, because they're going to be like, why the fuck am I even here? So like those are the kinds of things that you are going to notice. Like, and you have to think to yourself, like, if I were on set producing this scene, would I feel comfortable justifying this scene in these words to an actor who maybe has some questions about it? And those are just some things that you start to think about when you've had a chance to be on set. Make sure in every scene that it's very clear what each character wants. David Mamet once said that drama is two people in a room and there's only one chair. I think that's a pretty brilliant way of explaining it. So just like in each scene, just think about like, is it very clear what both characters want to accomplish in this scene? They both want to sit in the chair and only one of them can, for example. Try to keep your scene description to what's necessary, meaning like a lot of young writers almost want to like control their actors' like physical movements, meaning like, it'll be like, the character says his line and then it's like Tommy like rubs his chin and then like looks to the left, looks back forward, takes a drag of his cigarette, looks to the right, scratches his head. And then like Tommy has a line. And like if there's a reason for all that movement, then yeah, I guess leave it in. But it's like again, when you're producing it, the actors are going to figure out what they want to do. They're not going to have you, an actor's not going to read that and be like, okay, now I do this. And like, they're going to do it the way they want to do it. So in effect, it really just breaks up the flow of your dialogue to have this sort of like unnecessary scene description in the middle. So again, unless it's necessary, just try to minimize scene description. This is a big one. Did you write the best version or did you just get through it? We've all been there. There's obviously scenes that you're excited to write and scenes that you're not excited to write. So like you have to really hold yourself accountable and say like, again, did I write the best version of this scene or did I just like try to get through it? And that pertains to even like pitching or whatever. Like pitching is pretty scary when you haven't done it a lot or never. Um, you have to say to yourself like, did I go in pitching this thing with like really with like the intention of selling it? Did I put my best foot forward, or did I just like try to not make a fool of myself? So with your writing, like if your A story is great, but your B story is like, let's say 10 to 15 pages of your 60-page pilot, and it's very clear that like you didn't put the effort or the whatever that you put into your A story, like that's really going to show. So you really have to be like honest with yourself about like, is this the very best version of this story, or did I just get through it? And sort of like a cousin of that philosophy is in the in this story, is this what the character would organically do next, or are they doing this because it's what I need them to do to make the story work? And again, it's not easy, but like, you know, your character it has to make sense why they're doing what they're doing versus just them doing it because that's what you need them to do to make your story work. Anyone who says there's a hard and fast rule for formatting a script doesn't know what they're talking about. Again, I was a script coordinator on 6 different shows. There is no hard and fast rule for, I've heard, I don't know, the theory or whatever, or the philosophy that like parentheticals are only supposed to be used to denote like tone, meaning like, sad or stern or whatever it is, and never for like description. Like you shouldn't use a parenthetical to be like takes a sip of coffee. That's bullshit. Writers do all kinds of stuff with parentheticals. Often I feel like this is like advice that college professors give when they're just kind of like removed from the industry, but there's no hard and fast rule for stuff like that. As long as you're, consistent. Yeah. It's not as good or as bad as you think. So when you're writing a first draft, I think it's very easy to be like, this script sucks. This script isn't working. I don't know why I'm writing this. It's probably not as bad as you think it is. It's just first drafts suck. They're supposed to suck. That's why they're called vomit drafts a lot of times, or like you're just trying to get some kind of shitty version down on paper. So don't kill yourself don't beat yourself up too much thinking that like because the first draft is not great that it can't become something good. And conversely, like it's also probably not as good as you think it is. Sometimes I'll write stuff and I'm just like, this script is gonna buy me a new house. And then, like I'll get notes from my reps or whoever it is, and it's like, no, yeah, I guess you're right. That didn't really work as well as I kind of thought it was, or whatever. Truth is, your script is probably somewhere in the middle, and you never know. Sometimes you'll write gold, but it's probably somewhere in the middle. Conflicts, obstacles, drive, or growth. Every scene has to have conflicts, obstacles, drive, or growth. And if your scene does not have that, it's got to go. That's a pretty self-explanatory rule. But yeah, just think about with each scene, does every scene have that? Misdemeanors become felonies, not the other way around. You want everything to build. So if your character murders someone in Act 1, we're not going to care that they're jaywalking in Act 6. Like, everything's got to build. Character happens to plot. Plot doesn't just happen to character. Yeah, like Michael Corleone, Al Pacino, he happened to The Godfather. Like, The Godfather, that plot didn't just sort of like happen to him. And that's like, this is another way of saying that you're like protagonist. You need to have an active protagonist. Yeah, your protagonist needs to be sort of driving what is happening. It's almost like the story wanted to go one way, and then because your protagonist sort of like dropped himself or herself into it, it went the way they wanted it to go. Don't take choice away from your character. Yeah, I see young writers kind of do this a lot. Like, if your character is pointing a gun at somebody, they can make the choice to shoot that person or not shoot that person, and that is interesting. But if the person who they're pointing the gun at lunges at them and then they shoot sort of in self-defense, like, I don't know. I feel like that's not as interesting, and I feel like you've taken choice away from your character because they kind of had no choice but shoot that person at that point. Yeah, so this is something that has, I don't know, I discovered it at some point, and it's really helped me, is writing out the beats of what your character is doing in your story. So like, if you literally just write it out, like, and write it from the first person. So pretend you're the character and say like, first, I'm going to go looking for evidence. When I don't find that evidence, I'm going to go looking for this person instead. Then I find this person, and then we do blank. And then when that doesn't go well, then blank happens. And like, if you really give yourself like an honest run through each one of these beats, you're going to make sure, you're going to see if your story is emotionally tracking. And two, you're going to see if it's tracking from a story standpoint. Like, do the progression of the beats make sense emotionally and story wise? And if you really take not just like kind of half-assed, be like, oh yeah, this happened. Like, if you really take the time to be disciplined about that and go beat for beat, it'll really help you make sure that your story makes logical sense. So you want to make sure your world is unfolding organically. Yeah, you want to be disciplined about like doing all your outlining and doing all that stuff. Whatever prep you do before you start writing the script. But I tend to try to not like over outline, because I want to make sure, I find that when you over outline and you're too familiar with your story, it doesn't always unfold as organically in script as it should. Because because there could be this like big reveal, and to you it doesn't even seem like that big of a reveal, because you're like, yeah, like I've known that was going to happen for 6 months. But your reader is not familiar with your story at all. And to your reader, it's like, holy shit. So yeah, you just want to make sure that you're not sort of like, you want to make sure your character is experiencing this world organically, and over outlining and over preparing can sometimes be an inhibitor to that. And like, in that same vein, like, if you've got a big awesome set piece or something, or a big reveal, like, don't undersell it. I just have this boss would tell us, like, go to Prostown. Like, don't be afraid to spend some time like really selling this like big action, set piece. I haven't read the script for Jurassic Park, but I would imagine like that first reveal, when like you first see the dinosaurs and it's the music and it's this big like epic, I would imagine that's probably like, I don't know, page, 2 pages, something of just like pure scene description, just like bring the reader right into that world. So yeah, don't be afraid to go to Prostown. Your time is valuable. You need to understand that there's a monetary value on your time. Let's say you need to buy like a widget, fictional product from the 80s movie Back to School. You need to buy a widget, and at the local CVS, it's going to cost you $30. And you're like, I could go to whatever place across town and get it for $10. But like, if that's going to cost you another hour or whatever it's going to cost you, you need to say like, is it worth me spending that hour getting this discount on this widget? Because that's an hour that I'm not spending in front of my computer. I'm not spending writing. I'm not spending doing something for my career. And um, you need to just sort of always be considering like what your time is worth and what the monetary value of your time is. And you need to also like really think about that. So like when, I don't know, when someone asks me to go out for like coffee or lunch or something, like I really have to consider like it's not that I don't like this person or I don't want to go spend time whatever having lunch with this person, but like it's almost like they're asking to me to take money out of my pocket to spend the time doing this because like that's time that I could be sitting down writing and who knows what kind of monetary value that writing is going to translate to. Or if you're asking somebody to read your script, like, again, you're sort of asking them to take money out of their pocket. So just don't take it personally or don't be offended if they turn you down for lunch or they turn you down for reading your script or whatever it is, because like, again, when you're a writer, it's just time. There's a monetary value on your time, and you need to sort of come to understand that. Let the writing keep you sane because everything else will drive you crazy. This job is not about like the parties and the networking and the whatever. Like, this job is about the work in the lab. It is about sitting in front of your computer, putting in the hours, because that's the only thing that they can't take away from you. Like, you can't control. Everyone's going to tell you how hard it is to succeed in this business, and they're right. And you can't control that narrative. I can't control what my reps may or may not be doing for me. I can't control all the reasons outside of writing that someone may or may not want to hire me. The only thing I can control is the work in the lab. No one can stop me from sitting in front of my computer writing, and you just have to have faith that putting in that work is going to eventually be enough. And it also kind of bleeds into this like, don't try to be something, try to do something. Like, don't focus on like, oh, I really want to be a writer. Focus on like the doing of that, the sitting in front of your computer, putting in the work in the lab. And remember, like, this career, like, you have to be prepared to fight every single day. And what that fight may look like is like every single day you have to be prepared to wake up and like put in the hours in front of your computer when nobody's paying you to do that, or trying to get meetings with people, or trying to network, or whatever it is that you're trying to do for your career. You have to be willing to every day wake up and fight that fight. And again, you're often not getting paid to fight that fight. So like, you have to be driven to do this. You have to be driven in a way that very few people are. So like, unless this is a job that you're like, I can't see myself doing anything else, this is my calling in life, this is what I have to do, I would say don't do this, because it is very emotionally taxing and frankly physically exhausting to wake up like that, to wake up and have to fight like that every single day. And I think the like, the like, are you a fighter? Do you have it in you? I think that sounds like motivational. And I guess in a way it is, but it's also like, it's tough when you've been fighting this way for 20 years or however long it is. And like, you've gone so far down this path, you're not really qualified to do anything else. So like, you need to really ask yourself, like, yeah, if you're saying like, I'm just starting out, I'm a few years into this, whatever it is, like, I still got a lot of fight left in me. But like, you got to really ask yourself, like, am I going to have this much fight 20 years from now? Am I going to be able to keep fighting and keep doing all these things I have to do when nobody's paying me to do them? In this business, you got to plant 1,000 seeds to get one carrot. And it goes back to the, like, you got to fight every day. It's just, you got to take a lot of shots to get one to land. Remember, the worst thing you write is better than the best thing that you don't write. it's the whole like, people will say like, "Oh, I only ran a mile today, or I only ran a half mile today. I'm such a loser." And it's like, well, at least you ran, even if it's a mile or a half mile or whatever it is. At least you did something. I mean, if you sat down and you wrote something that sucks, at least you wrote something, and it's better than not writing anything at all. Best thing you write is better than the worst thing. The worst thing you write is better than the best thing you don't write. And I will close on this. I heard recently something that I thought was a very cool way to put what we do, and I had never heard this before. Uh, this woman told me that this can be the best job in the world, and it's because you can be laying in your bed at night and you come up with an idea, and then you write it, and then someone creates it, and then you get to watch this world on a screen. And like, what other job in the world can you just come up with an idea in the middle of the night in your bed, and then someone brings it to life? And I thought that that was such a cool and such a poetic way to put what we do. And I don't know if it's a good enough outro for my friend who wants me to do the like, peace out, party people. But that is how we'll conclude this video. I hope it was helpful, and spread the word to your friends.